ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Lisa Simone is a singer and performer. She starred in Broadway musicals and has an international solo career. To say that Lisa was born into music would be something of an understatement. Her mother was the legendary Nina Simone, singer, pianist, songwriter and civil rights activist. Lisa was Nina's only child, and she grew up as the beneficiary of her mother's incredible talent, but also at the mercy of her volatile temper and erratic moods. Lisa had to find a way to forge her own way as a woman and as an artist. She's in Australia on tour with her show, A Daughter's Tribute to Nina Simone. Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Your early years were spent in Mount Vernon, New York. What was the house there like? Can you describe it for me?
Oh, yes, I can. From the basement all the way up to the third floor, the memories of that house inspire so much joy in me. I even remember my phone number we had to memorize. So it was the first place that I ever remember in my entire life. My parents were together. I had dogs. I had school friends, had my own room. I remember the TV shows, the coloring books, the dances, the records I used to listen to, the food that I loved to eat, and what it was like to swing on the tire and eat the apples off the apple tree. It's just wonderful memories.
What was the wallpaper like in that house?
Well, in the living room, it was like a golden hue with a greenish tint, and it had swirls that, if I reflect properly, almost look like a bit like fleur-de-lis. And I used to run my fingers over it all the time. I loved the feel of it on the tips of my fingers.
Were you allowed into your mum's bedroom?
Absolutely. Whenever I wanted to, for as long as I wanted to be in there. I had a blast in her wigs and shoes and the three-way mirror where I could see myself, at least 10 of me on each side. So whatever dance move I did, everybody was synchronized. And it was fun.
And you really had free roam to dress up in those amazing costumes and wigs and outfits?
Yes, that's really interesting to reflect back and realize that Mom had no problem with me doing that, yeah.
Where else did she store all of those stage clothes at your place?
In the basement. She had her furs, and a lot of her gowns were in cold storage in our basement.
And was there always music playing at home, Lisa?
Yes, if Mommy wasn't playing it, I was playing it on the 45s. It would be anything from Doris Day, Que Sera Sera, to Frida Payne, All That's Left Is a Band of Gold, or Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell, Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Otis Redding, Dock of the Bay. These were just some of my favorite tunes that I would play.
And would you and your mum sing together when you were little?
We did, all the time. Everybody liked my singing voice, and so whenever I sang, it made people happy, it made other people happy, and it came naturally.
Did you have an understanding when you were little of your mum's talent, of her fame?
No. She pretty much shielded me from that. Both my parents protected me from that, which I'm grateful for. The only aspect of that touched me on a regular basis and made no sense was that they were gone a lot. And so my mother told me I had 13 nannies in 7 years, which can be traumatic.
What about your dad at home? How did you spend time together in that house?
Well, Dad was definitely the grounding force. He was a strong personality. And I remember watching Westerns with him in his bedroom a lot. And he liked Planters peanuts. So they had the cans of nuts that you could shake and you could hear all the nuts just moving around. We would watch Man from U.N.C.L.E. and The Avengers. And it was fun. It was nice.
He'd been a New York policeman, a detective, before he married your mum and then became her manager. Could you still see that tough Harlem cop in him?
Yes, I think he was tough before he became a cop. My dad was half black and half white, born in 1928 in Virginia, which was the Bible Belt. And if anybody has a notion of what life was like as a black person in the South at that time, imagine being half black and half white. So he was the youngest of 5 brothers, and I really believe something must have happened to him that made him just say, I'm just going to be the toughest dude in the room forever.
How were you told that your parents were splitting up, were separating?
I wasn't. In those days, kids were not so much involved in the decisions being made by the grown-ups. So you learn how to be a chameleon and to just roll with the flow. And one day they were together and one day they weren't.
What had things been like in the lead up to that? What do you remember?
Well, when I was 8, I went to live with my mother's eldest sister, my Aunt Lucille Wayman, who was at that time Reverend Lucille Waddell. And I went to live in North Carolina, Rutherfordton, North Carolina, for a year with her. And in reflection, I believe that that's what enabled my parents to really make whatever transitions needed to be done without my schooling and everything being disrupted.
What were things like at the Reverend's house in North Carolina?
It was amazing. I mean, as an only child, it was great to have my cousins there and to have music in the house. And if you're familiar with Southern food, from the biscuits and the pumpkin pies and everything, it was amazing. Church all the time. I still remember a lot of the gospel songs that I learned. And I still remember a lot of the kids' songs. The first song I ever, quote unquote, wrote was an assignment when I was in 3rd grade. And the teacher wanted us to memorize the poem. I had the notion to turn it into a song, which I still remember to this day.
Can you sing it for me?
Oh, are you ready? Okay. I've got the wiggly wiggles today. I just can't sit still. My teacher says she's got to get me a stop me wiggle pill. I got the giggly giggles today. I couldn't tell you why, but if Mary hiccups one more time, I'll giggle till I cry. I got to stamp my wiggles out and hold my giggles in, 'cause wiggling makes me giggle, and gigglers never win.
Thank you,
And see,
Lisa.
we're giggling.
So, things were happy with your aunt and the musical career is already in full flight, I can tell that. But that house that you'd love so much up in Mount Vernon, did you ever get to live there again?
Mom and I returned when I was around 9, but it wasn't the same. It was more of an echo of the vibrant, lively space that it used to be. Dad was gone. Everybody was gone. It was just me and her, and she had changed. The softness that I was used to wasn't there anymore.
This was a time when your mum was increasingly involved in the civil rights movement, and Malcolm X's family lived next door to you.
Well, Mom got involved in the civil rights movement when Dad and her were still together. Mississippi Goddamn came out in 1964. I do believe that the church in Alabama was blown up in 1963. That, in turn, because of the little girls that were killed, Mom told me that she was a new mother. I was one. That she was so angry that she wrote Mississippi Goddamn and poured all of that rage into that song, so much so that her voice dropped an octave. She was still married to my dad at that time. So from 1963 onwards, or 1964 onwards, she crossed over and she never came back.
Your mum took you to live in New York. What was that place like and that time like?
It was awesome. We lived in a high-rise. We were across the street from the Lincoln Center. My room looked over Central Park. My curtains and all of my duvet covers and sheets were dinosaurs, which were my favorite. And I had another nanny at that time. And while the trappings were wonderful, the vibration in the house was not safe. It was not happy. And Mom was angry. And it seemed like I just couldn't connect with her the way that I was used to.
What sort of pressure was she under at that time? I mean, as you say now, maybe more as an adult looking back, it mightn't be something you're conscious of as a little kid, but I guess she's there as a single mum trying to financially support you. How do you see the forces that were acting on her at that point?
Well, I was 10 at the time, and when I was in the military, I took a behavioral theory class, and in one of the chapters, they talk about stress. And I remember a list of the most stressful life changes that we can undergo. Death was first, and divorce was second. And my mom was dealing with a very messy divorce. Mom and dad are the ones who built her career. They built up the entire like kingdom of Stroud Productions. My dad is Andrew Stroud. So you had Stroud Productions. We had the record label. We had the publishing companies. We had Mom's career. When he retired, what inspired him to retire from the police department was the plan that the two of them had put into place to choose which one's career they would put both of their energies into first. They chose hers. Her dream was to be the first female Black classical pianist to play at Carnegie Hall. He took his retirement money, retired from the police department early, and used that money to get her into the Carnegie Hall. And so I have to preface my answer to your question in this way because we're talking about an entire dream that was being realized by the both of them. So when that fell apart, when they could no longer get along, no longer live in the same house together, I wish I was old enough to say, well, don't be stupid. Don't let the whole kingdom fall apart. You don't have to live in the same house in order for what you've built to be maintained. But at that time, their relationship, when it was no more, everything fell apart. Everything. And so Mom found herself without a rudder, without a manager. She was unpredictable when it came to her concerts. She was also dealing with, and I think it's important to remind myself as well as everyone listening, that my mother was also dealing with her own emotional, mental issues. My mom was seeing a psychiatrist when she met my dad. So, which means that was happening before that. And so when you have that type of inner unrest that you're dealing with on a daily basis, and you're supposed to go out into the world and act quote unquote normal. Well, your normal might not be another person's normal. So as you can see, I've thought about all this. So it's like you're a single mother, you're rebuilding your career, you're trying to figure out how you're going to live, where we're going to live, how you're going to make sure your daughter's taken care of. And there was so much pressure on her at that time.
You've said that she was angry, that there was a lot of anger. Did she take that out on you, Lisa?
There were times when I felt like she did, and I didn't understand where it was coming from or why felt like it was so extreme. Yes.
Were there safe people for you? Like when you're living alone with one parent, that's such an intense kind of relationship. Were there teachers or other relatives that you could talk about what was going on at home, or was it a time where you were a bit locked in that relationship with your mum one-on-one?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't remember really talking to anybody about what my experiences were with Mom. However, yes, there were other people, my grandmother, my mother's mother, my Aunt Hannah, who went to high school with my mother, who was my godmother, my cousin Joyce on my father's side, Al Shackman, my mother's musical director. So there were other people around that I could get a hug from or I could feel safe with. And I knew who they were, but it's not like I got on the phone to call them and cry or whatever.
You and your mum began then moving around all over the place. Where did the two of you head from New York City?
Went from New York City to North Carolina again. And, I'll talk about it. My mother and I attended a funeral when I might have been 10, for her sister's husband's funeral. So it was her brother-in-law. While we were in North Carolina, all of us gathered at my grandmother's house. The sisters got into an argument, and it was really bad, to the point where my mother and I were ushered out of the house. And I remember saying, I don't want to go with her. I didn't do anything. Why do I have to go with her? And someone in the family found us another place to stay, which was with a couple by the name of Clara and Mills McCurry. We were there for a couple of days, and I remember the lady not being impressed or intimidated by Nina Simone being in their home. I think we were there for 2 days. While we were there, my mother asked them if they would take me in for a year to go to school. And I remember being horrified, just like, we don't even know these people, but that just goes to show, I don't want to say how desperate she was, but obviously she didn't feel like she had any wiggle room, and she felt comfortable enough with them to be able to feel confident that she could leave me there. So I wound up staying there for a year, going to school in 5th grade.
Were they good to you?
They were. They were very, very, very good to me. I learned a lot there, and I had my own room, and I had roller skates and, all the stuff. She made poached egg for me every morning and grits. And it was a wonderful year of safety and a firm base. So much so to the point where when Mom would call, I didn't want to talk to her on the phone. And I definitely did not want to leave. And when it was time to leave, my heart was broken. And that's when I went with Mom to Barbados.
And did you go to school in Barbados?
No. Mom was looking for a home for us, and it just seems like she was just, she was going from one place to the next. She said to me when her and Dad divorced, we're nomads now. And I'd never heard that word before. So we were living a nomadic life, and she was intent on finding us a home. And in Barbados, she was looking for a home for us. And while we were there, she had to figure out, how was my daughter going to stay occupied during the day? And I didn't want to spend my days with her anyway. And a friend of hers, Mr. Forbes, had a moving company called Forbes International, and somehow I wound up getting a job there at 10 years old.
10?
Mm-hmm. Working in the office. I've always been good at organizing and filing, and so I was in there doing that.
Were you paid for that? Was it an actual job, or you were just being occupied?
That's a good question. I don't remember. I would imagine I got something.
So after this period in Barbados, you kept moving, nomads, as your mum said, mainly in Europe, and you ended up in boarding school in Switzerland. What kind of fit was that for you?
We went from Barbados to Africa. We went to Liberia. And I lived with another family for a year.
A year in Africa? What was that like?
In Liberia. It was incredible. I mean, we had to get settled in, but Miriam Makeba was another one of my godmothers. And my mother and Miriam Makeba were best friends. And so Auntie Zanzi, which is what I called her, when Auntie Zanzi and Uncle Stokely Carmichael, who she was married at the time, they initially invited us to Africa. We went to Guinea, and we stayed in the palace of then President, His Excellency, President Sekou Touré. And then we went on to Liberia. We were invited by the elite that were there to Liberia at the behest of my Auntie Sensi. And Mom loved it there. She, remember, because of her relationship to the civil rights movement and to us as Black people not knowing who we were or who we are still, to return to the motherland was huge. And to be able to be around people that were her color, her hue, and to not feel like she was out of place. And so I ended up staying with the family there for a year, going to school there.
And did she, when you say, what an amazing contrast to being a Black woman in the States, did she soften or relax, or did you see a different ease with her in Liberia?
There was an excitement. There was always excitement. Just a question of how that excitement translated at the time. And in Africa, for the most part, there was joy within that excitement, but that was not necessarily always the case. When we first got there and she was surrounded and being shown and introduced around, and I was with people my own age, that was wonderful. And when I lived with the family of the Dennises, and she was away doing what she was doing, I would imagine performing, that was wonderful. But when she came back, there was a shift because I was always very guarded when she was around. And then we got a house on the beach. And I went from living with them to living with her, and that was hell. So
hell because of her moods or her anger or...
Just, she was going through what she was going through. That's it. That's the most general way of saying it. And let's face it, I have 3 children. My youngest is 26. And on a good day, under the best circumstances, when you're dealing with a teenager, it's difficult, period. And at that time, I was 12. And so she was going through what she was going through, and I was going through what I was going through. And there was no foundation for either one of us. There was no place of safety for either one of us. So I don't blame my mother because she did her best, but it wasn't easy for both of us. And we couldn't find what the love that we had for each other and that we continue to have for each other, whether she's here or not, it continues, that got buried underneath just doing our best to survive.
After your time in Africa, your mum moved you both to Europe and you ended up in boarding school in Switzerland. Did that feel like a bit of a respite in some way?
Every place I ever went to where I wasn't with my mother was a respite, period. And so because living with her and being in, and I'm not, I realize everything I'm saying, she sounds like this monster. My mother was not a monster. She was a human being. She was beautiful. And I'm going to take time to say this. She was intelligent. She was fun when she was allowed to be. And she was a loving soul when she felt safe enough to access that part of herself. So, as her child and as the sounding board that was on the receiving end when there was nowhere else for her pain to be directed at, when I was not in that type of an environment, I could be free and be the little girl or young lady that I was. So whether I was in North Carolina with my Aunt Lucille at the age of 8, with the McCurrys at the age of 10, with the Dennises at the age of 12 in Africa, or whether I was in Switzerland at the age of 13. When your foundation is one of disruption and fear, and you go somewhere where there's a sense of calm, no matter what is going on where you are, you feel amazing. And Pita, who became my sister in Liberia, she and I are still in touch to this day. She's told me now that she marveled, she was 16, I was 12, at how I always laughed at everything. I was always cheerful. No matter what was going on, I was the most cheerful person in the house until my mother came around, and then she saw the shift. So when you know what war is like, and you're in some semblance of an environment that is peaceful, you're appreciative of every moment.
Your mother wanted you to come back and live with her in Switzerland after your time in boarding school. So what decision did you end up making when you were just 14 or so?
I didn't want to return to her house. I wanted to stay with my friends. I mean, what 14-year-old wouldn't want to stay with their friends? And it was getting worse and worse. It was just getting worse. And so I'd been at La Châtaigneraie in Lausanne for 1 year already. And she was living in Nyon at the time, and she wanted me to live with her. And granted, there's also the financial aspect. Boarding school is not cheap. In Switzerland, no less. You know what I mean? So let's just add that to this. And so when a particular circumstance came up with my mother that made me realize that I felt like my life was in danger, I remembered that I had a return ticket to New York. and we had 3 days off from school. And so I said to my mom, I'm going to go see Dad. And I made an announcement. And I said, I'm going to prove to you that he loves me, like I've been telling you all these years. Or I'm going to prove to myself that he doesn't, like you've been telling me all these years. But either way, we're going to get this straight. And so I called my dad. He was like, sure, come on. And it was November 1976. And I flew to New York City on a one-way ticket. Dad thought I had a round-trip ticket. I knew I had a one-way ticket. I figured I'll deal with that once I get to the other side.
How did your dad react when he realized that it was a one-way ticket and you wanted to hang around?
I think about 5 days in, he just started asking me, like, so do you have your flight reservations? What's happening here? And he had a notion something was going on. And finally, as you asked me earlier, did I talk to people about what was going on? I realized I never even talked to my dad. I could have. I just sucked everything up. So when he asked me, I opened the doors and windows into what my experience was like and what I was dealing with, which wasn't easy. And he never wavered. He never paused. And he opened his doors to me in his one-bedroom apartment. He was living there with his fiancée in his one-bedroom apartment off of Central Park West in New York City. And that became my home.
Were you much in touch with your mum, Lisa, in the years after you left to go and live with your dad?
No, not really. I didn't want to be. And of course, since I was living with my dad and his girlfriend, who was white at the time, that just only added fuel to the fire for her, So it wasn't an experience that I had to endure anymore.
You'd had this really disrupted childhood, moving so many places and all of this fraught relationship at home with your mum, and then land in New York, finish high school. What were your plans for after school, Lisa? What did you imagine?
Well, I was a very good student. I was a top student. My plan was always to go to university. I couldn't wait to go to university. I was good with languages. And so my last year of high school, I worked 2 jobs. I went to community college in the mornings, and I attended my last classes in high school in the afternoons. And I was on the fast track so that when I actually started university, I could go into my sophomore year. But the plans that I had so meticulously put in place were not meant to be, because when the grown-ups got involved and when you're at that age and you are applying to universities, you have to have the assistance of the adults in your life. When that happened, things would have required me having patience because they didn't work out at the pace that I was under the impression they would be moving at. And I didn't have patience. 18 and patience don't go in the same sentence. And so for some reason, the Air Force came into the picture. I do not remember how, but I do remember grabbing that as an option with vigor. And I ended up going into the United States Air Force.
What was your initial training like? What do you remember of? Was there a moment when you thought, okay, this is what the Air Force is like?
There was a moment.
Is real.
There was a moment of, what have I done? And that was the next morning when I woke up to somebody yelling, turning over beds, orders, and, feet hitting the floor, us all running about, not knowing what direction to go in. And it was a very eye-opening, sobering moment saying, uh-oh. And that uh-oh lasted about 10 years.
About 10 years. So you stayed for a long stretch of time.
Yes. I went in at 18. I got out at 29.
This just seems such a different world from all the different worlds you'd been in before.
Definitely.
This. Yeah. How did it something you enjoyed?
No. Otherwise I would have stayed in. And I realized about 6 years in that I would never self-actualize in the job because I didn't like it. In order to self-actualize, you have to at least preferably love what you do. And so with that realization in mind, I started to ask myself, what do I want to do? What do I want to do with my life? Basically, what do I want to be when I grow up? And that's when singing turned in a whole new way. I started looking at it in a whole new way.
How did you first start singing in public? Where were you?
I started singing with an a cappella quintet. Our name was the Gospel Cameras, like a camera. And I gave everybody their parts. And the first time I ever sang in public was in church. And I'll never forget it. I had a nervous tick in my mouth. My knees wouldn't stop shaking. And I loved it. And so we were together.
You loved it. You had a
years.
nervous tick and your knees were shaking and you still loved it.
I loved it. I love harmonies. I love music. I love gospel music. On my bucket list of projects to do before I die will be a gospel project.
But in the military, were you singing? Were you performing at all anywhere?
Later on, it found me after a glass of wine. I'm not a big drinker. I was a bodybuilder. I was an aerobics instructor. My body was my temple. And one night I went out with a girlfriend of mine who owned her own hair salon. She was a coiffeuse. And I had a glass of wine, and I remember this gentleman, he was African-American, at this piano, and this was in Frankfurt, Germany, so we were in a bistro.
Was this with the military? You were stationed
I was
in Frankfurt?
Still in the military, yes. So my last base was Rhine-Main Air Base in Frankfurt, Germany. And so we went out to this bistro, and this gentleman was on the piano playing. The way he moved his leg up and down reminded me of church. I don't remember what he was singing, but apparently I was so inspired I got up and started singing with him. I don't remember what the song was. Shortly thereafter, my phone started ringing. And I remember this one lady saying to me, my name is, well, I didn't even know her name at the time. She's like, I'm looking for a background singer. And I'm like, who are you and how did you get my number? She said, oh, Janine. Now, my girlfriend's name was Janine, who owned the hair salon. She said, Janine is telling everybody about your voice. And in that moment, I was like, well, shoot, it comes easy for me. I can make some extra money. I love music. Sure, why not? And that was the beginning of me branching into the musical world. And from there, I started singing with the Magic Platters, the Shooby-Doo-Doo-Wop songs. I started singing with, she was a Cuban singer, Bésame, Bésame Mucho. We did all that. And a party band where we were doing like Rick James and Whitney Houston. And the musicians started asking me if I wanted to front their bands. And there was one particular gig I was asked to do at a resort in Switzerland where they asked me to do My Baby Just Cares for Me. And that's when I had my aha moment. I was sitting in my apartment and I said, wait a minute. If I can do at this gig what I think I can do, and if I have the response that I've been getting, maybe this is what I should be doing with my life. And obviously that's what happened because I came back. I contacted my parents with all this vim and excitement and was reporting to them, I've changed my mind. And when I made this announcement, I made a complete 180, much to their horror. And yeah.
Why'd they horror?
Well, at the time, I was asking that same question. I mean, why are you reacting like this? I don't understand.
Your mother
it.
is Nina Simone. Surely someone who understands a woman wanting to make a career in music would be
her. And my
her.
dad is Andrew Stroud, who helped her do it and built the whole record label. So who better to have in my corner than my two parents who can show me the ropes? And they weren't excited about it at all. My mom was scared out of her mind because she didn't want me to experience the lows and the fickleness and everything else that she associated the music industry with. And my dad, being the businessman that he always was, wanted me to have a firm foundation. And so I just said, well, I'm doing this anyway, because for the first time in my life, I feel this fire in my belly. I feel like this is the direction I should be going in. And for the first time ever, I'm not going to listen to anybody else. Granted, I didn't listen to anybody else when I went in the military either, but I had forgotten about that. So I went ahead and I thought it would be easy. Actually, I thought it would just flow like it had up until that point. And 7 years later, they saw me in Rent, in the original Broadway cast of Rent. And they saw how I was able to do what I did and how the audience responded to me. And at that point, they were able to relax and we could talk shop from then on. And they came to all my shows.
What was some of the most helpful advice you got from each of them around music?
Neither one of them did Broadway, so they couldn't really address that in particular. They would ask, how are the shows going? And oftentimes I would have vocal issues because when you're doing musicals, it's athletic singing. So it's a different approach. It was interesting to field their questions. The voice, I learned, is a science unto itself. If you don't know how to access it in a way that doesn't damage your voice or in a way that enables you to prolong its power, then you're bound to run into difficulties. And when you're doing the same show over and over and over 8 times a week, that also takes a certain level of commitment to the story, the telling of the story that you're living 8 times a week. That was thrilling, but it was also extremely tiring. I was tired all the time. And I remember my mother telling me throughout the years how tired she was all the time and how I scoffed at that. And they say, don't judge a man until you've walked in their shoes. My mother's voice just echoed in my ears. And I was like, oh, that's what she meant. That's what she meant. How do you explain this to someone?
You'd had that period when you were a teenager and coming into your own independence where you'd really had to distance yourself from your mum. Was there a point where you reconnected and established relationship again on a different setting?
Yes. What I'm about to say does not necessarily mean that this is how long the gap was, but I felt there was a reset to our relationship when my daughter was born on May 25th, 1999. When she flew in 3 days after. My daughter's name is Nina Simone, and Mom flew in from Poland 3 days later, heavy laden with all kinds of gifts and boxes, and I walked in, I felt like I was in FAO Schwartz toy store. And when I walked in, the first thing I did was I just pushed my daughter into her arms, and she was holding a 3-day-old or child, and just to see the look of awe on her face. I mean, my mother's jaw was slack as she fumbled and made sure that she held fast to her granddaughter. It was beautiful, and it was a moment for all 3 of us.
10 years ago, you were involved in a documentary film about your mum called What Happened, Miss Simone. What was involvement in that about for you?
When the documentary came out, I call that a daughter's promise fulfilled, because when my mother was dying, I told her that I had her back and that she could let go and I would make sure she was not forgotten. And I've always said that the documentary was that promise fulfilled. But I've realized since I've been here in Australia this time that, in fact, I continue to fulfill that promise. I never stopped.
You know, as you've described the highs and lows of this relationship, what were things like when your mum passed away in 2003? How were things between you then?
They were wonderful. I was angry with her for leaving this world before my vision of the Pollyanna bubble we could have had together was realized. But our relationship was the best it had ever been. And it was, it was good.
I think that sounds like it's a tribute to her, but also the adult that you'd become, that you could kind of have the grace and generosity to, I don't know, keep trying, keep turning up for that relationship.
Well, I put her in a training program on how to love me, which she didn't know she was in. When I realized I couldn't run away from the relationship, so I had to figure out, well, then if I can't run, what do I do? And it hit me that all these years, meaning all my life, as with all of us that are children, I've been living in my mother's world. Now it's time for her to learn how to live in mine, because in my world, everybody's happy. And so when I made that realization and I was like, well, now I have to teach her how to love me, I had to figure out what that meant for myself. Well, how can you teach someone to love you if you don't know how to love yourself? So that decision inspired me to go on I was teaching her to love me and learning how to love myself at the same time, and finding my voice to say, okay, when you talk to me this way, that doesn't make me feel good. So I really appreciate it if you wouldn't do that. I'd never done that before. So if someone's stepping on your foot and you don't, and your foot is hurting and you don't say anything, they're not going to move their foot. But if you say, ow, chances are, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know I was hurting you. As my mom, she loved me. That was my logic. If I let you know that you're hurting me, then you don't want to hurt me, so you're going to stop, right? And if you don't stop, then that lets me know something else. So there was the grinding of gears for both of us. However, the program worked, and I learned more how to find my voice and express my own voice in terms of the things that I need and the things that I don't. And she, in turn, was given more of a roadmap, because everyone around her, she's Nina Simone, for God's sake. You got yes people everywhere. And so when people are living in that kind of a bubble, they don't really have an idea of really what's acceptable and not acceptable behavior, especially when you want to be in relationship with someone. And so I was that voice, and the ship started to turn around slowly for us both. And by the time she died, we would be on the phone laughing together. Last time I saw her, she came to see me in Aida in New York City. And she was so proud, and so it was beautiful. And it's a testimony for myself and the decisions that I have been inspired to make, to move forward, to find my own balance. If you want to be happy, I don't want to live. People used to say to me, well, what'd your mother teach you? She taught me what not to do. The biggest lesson I learned from my mother was what not to do. And at the time, they would look at me quizzically. It's not me putting my mother down that's valuable. Someone teaching you what not to do can be even more valuable than what to do, because I didn't want to live my life like her. I didn't want to be that person.
And I love that you gave her the gift of a clear path, of a clear roadmap, so that she could have a good relationship with you.
Yes, and that's what she wanted too. We both wanted that. People would tell me that she would say sometimes, okay, Lisa's coming. What is she like? I never knew that, or she would get nervous when I was about to fly in. I don't imagine my mother nervous. You know what I mean? She makes everybody else nervous. Really? You know what I mean? So to just learn those little things, it's like, wow, both of us are finding our way. Both of us have got the jitters. Both of us want this to be a good visit. Oh, it's just invaluable.
You described how your mum had struggled with mental health, even before she married your dad. Was seeing a psychiatrist, had challenges herself. Had she got good help by that point in her life? Was she being better supported than perhaps she'd been when she was a single mum with you and you were growing up?
Well, she was being supported. However, the way that she was being supported helped her, but it also helped the people whose motivation was to make sure she could get on that stage to make money. Mom considered herself in her later years to be a show pony. So the peace that I have found, the sense of self that I have found, the self-love that I have connected with, and the way that I can honor myself and love myself, I don't feel like my mother ever found. So while Mom is well known for singing the song, I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free, which really expounds upon her relationship to freedom and her yearning for that, I wrote the song Finally Free. I crossed over the finish line. And freedom, as far as I'm concerned, comes from within, which is what I have been talking about from the stage as well. It's not outside of us. It's not in a marriage. It's not in a job. It's not in your paintings. It's inside of us. And when you are able to go within, everything that we search for outside of us, we already embody. And that's what many of us do not know. And so I've been able to find and connect with, and still am working on, because it is a cultivated practice, I've been able to do what my mother was not able to do as I carry on this legacy and stand upon her shoulders.
You're a mum yourself, as you've been referring to. You know, when we haven't had the model of a parent in an obvious way, it can be tricky. You kind of got to find our own way through that. What have you drawn on to guide you, or how do you see yourself as being a mother to your kids in a way that maybe you missed out on growing up?
It's been difficult and it's been joyful. It's been many things, as parenthood is for everybody. My kids have been my greatest teachers. And so as I now come into my sunset years and I'm able to reflect on my 3 children, I have had different relationships with all 3 of them. Some regrets, yes, but I don't define myself by my regrets, and I don't define myself by my relationships, and I don't identify myself by anything outside of myself anymore. And I've learned how to forgive myself for the mistakes that I've made and the people that I've hurt and the decisions that I've made, knowing that I was doing the best that I could. Learning to forgive oneself is the hardest thing of all. And so my relationship with my children now is better than it's ever been, even as they navigate through their respective lives. If something comes up and I'm the monster in their story, I can be the monster in their story and be grateful to be the monster in their story, because if that's what enables them to navigate forward towards finding themselves, if me being that monster is what you need me to be, then so shall I be until you are ready to turn around and say, "Hi, Mom, I'm back." And that's taken a lot of growing up for me. Just talking about it makes my heart full. To be able to love, no matter what's going on, yourself and others, knowing that everything in life is just a season. That's all it is. And once we really start to remember that in our everyday, it takes so much of the pressure away. It takes so much of the self-blame and the guilt and the responsibility and all the crap that we carry and the pressure from day to day. It's like, you know what? Let me just have a cup of tea. Let me go take a walk. Let me breathe. Oh, I'm fine. I have clothes. I have a roof over my head. I have breath. I have all my senses. Life is fine. And tomorrow's another day. And if all of us can reach a place of self-acceptance as individuals, imagine the world we would be living in. Every single aspect of our journeys, even all the difficult people, the ones who were the worst to us, everyone plays a part in our stories. And they were our greatest teachers. And we are the sum total of all of our experiences. The question is, can you find your path and find your way to who you truly are? And that I have done.
What's it like for you to perform on stage now, Lisa, with all of this experience of Broadway and of solo singing and of singing as a little girl and of not singing in public? When you step onto a stage, how does it feel?
It is glorious. It's always been incredible. But because of everything I've just said, I've done my music. I've gotten my compositions out there. I have nothing that I need to prove to anybody. I have nothing more that I feel I need to say. I'm sure there's more I shall be saying, but I don't feel that need. So I can celebrate this legacy wholeheartedly and also remind audiences that there's so much more to this legacy than just Nina, ladies and gentlemen. I know we're all bedazzled by her. However, the footprint is so much larger and there's so much more. And I'm taking great joy in guiding audiences into how it lives today through my own music and how I stand up as the embodiment of this legacy. We're all legacies, and that's what I remind people of. All of us are legacies. All of us stand on the shoulders of our ancestors, and our children will stand upon our shoulders. And to be able to do so with joy and with smile, and with grace and with pride and with love, and to share that with everyone, it's just a gift.
There's that idea that songs don't really belong to anyone, even the person who's written them, but it's whoever's singing that song is the full expression of it. And that sort of is what it sounds like you're pointing to.
I had never thought of it that way. I mean, we all look through life through different lenses, do we not? And so I think songs touch all of us in the way that they touch us, and we connect to them for the reasons that we do.
Tell me about the one and only time you and your mum performed together on stage.
24th of July, 1999. Oh my goodness, we're close. I'm performing here on the 23rd. Oh my goodness,
this week.
I'm just realizing that. Oh, okay. It was at the Guinness Blues Festival in Dublin, Ireland, and I sang Music for Lovers. This particular portion, what I'm about to share, can be heard on my Simone on Simone album. It opens up with my mother saying, "I'd like to introduce you to my daughter, Simone." At that time, I was just using the name Simone. And we sang 2 songs together. We sang Compensation, and I did Music for Lovers when she allowed me to go down center stage. And Mom accompanied me in front of 7,000 people. And it took everything in me, all my Broadway training, to not burst into tears. There was so much joy. My heart was bursting. And in the middle of the song, she gets inspired to join me vocally. And I remember turning around and just grinning at her. And at the end of the song, I ran to her at the piano and threw my arms around her neck. And I'm so happy that song lives on the Simone on Simone album. And at the very end of the album, you hear her say what she said when I walked off stage. "That's my baby."
Lisa, it's been a real treat to meet you. Thank you so much for being my guest on Conversations.
It's been wonderful to be here with you today. Thank you.
Lisa Simone is in Australia on tour with her show A Daughter's Tribute to Nina Simone. And she's performing at QPAC in Brisbane this Wednesday, the 23rd of July, and then heads to Adelaide. This episode of Conversations was produced by Maggie Morris and recorded on the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples. Our executive producer is Nicola Harrison. I'm Sarah Konoski. Thanks for listening.
ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.